Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Maybe I need to repeat that. Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Okay, my name is Mike Adebamo. I'm the Dean of Faculty of Environmental Sciences. That's your place. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to our meeting with our presidential candidates on the state of Nigeria's housing markets. And it's also my pleasure to mention that this program is being powered by our own University of Lagos Center for Housing and Sustainable Development, the Roland Ibinova Foundation for Housing and Urban Development, and thirdly, First Southern Group. Let's appreciate them. And as we all know, what we're about to discuss is critical. It's so important because when you are mentioning the three basic needs of man, we all know that housing is one of those basic needs. And it's important for us to hear from our presidential candidates what provision or plan or agenda they have as far as this is concerned. So in order for us to start, I should have also apologized that we are starting about 30 minutes late. It's not in our character in the University of Lagos to start exactly at time. But because we need to be a little bit flexible for a program like this. And that's why we are starting 30 minutes late. So may I implore every one of us please to rise up on our feet as we take national anthem. We are going to take the two stanzas of our national anthem, and which we believe also will cover our opening prayer. So the national anthem, please. Prof. Sowore, please make him feel welcome. We also have Professor here with us. You are welcome. Professor Moghalu is here. You are also welcome. We have Alhaji Lawanson, Commissioner for Transportation, Lagos State. You are welcome. Professor Lawal, Commissioner for Housing. You are welcome. Mr. Latif Shulebo, Managing Director, Lagos State Urban you are welcome. We have Izipodi Opinion, Species for King S. Fonsi, is here. Please let me feel welcome. Dr. Olajumoke Akiode of the Center for Ethics and Sustainable Development, you are welcome. We have Kampana Afsa Bello, NITP, that's the University of Kampana, you are welcome. We also have Mr. Ayo Shunga, NDCO M. Homes, you are welcome. Mr. Adijano, NDCO Realty Point Limited, you are welcome. Mr. Joe Fedidavolo, you are welcome to our guests. We also are here with us, Mr. Babatunde Obadamosi, you are welcome. I'm sure as we proceed with this program, all other dignitaries that are well seated will be duly recognized. At this juncture, I would like to call on the founding director of the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development, University of Lagos, Professor T.G. Nubi, to take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. Let's respond now. At least we don't prepare for that. It's a pleasure to really welcome you. Before the opening remark, let me express our heart gratitude to the of the University of Lagos, to the presidential aspirants that are seated already. Let's appreciate them. We have them with us seated. We have in no particular order. Okay, let's follow the order that are seated here. For my immediate right, we have Mr. Isaac Oshitelu, the presidential aspirant for Accord Pass. Welcome, sir. Candidates. Okay, candidates. Okay, when we are used to candidates in the university, so candidates for Accord Party. We also have seated next to him Mr. Durotoye of Alliance for New Nigeria, ANP. ANN, sorry, it's ANP, ANN. And then we have Mr. Omoyele Sowore, African Action Congress, ACC. We also have Dr. Mrs. Obi Ezekwesi, Alliance Congress Party of Nigeria, ACPN. Okay. We also have Professor Kingsley Moghalu of the Young Progressive Party, YPP. You are welcome, sirs and ma'am. Let me welcome Mr. Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos, ably represented by the BBC, Academics and Research, Professor Fabio. The presidential candidates as introduced, the special guests, members of the university community, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. Housing is the bedrock of any civilization. In the United States, it is the core of the American dream. In UK and other developed countries, it is a center of national welfare and socio-economic transformation programs. several Asian and even African countries have hinged social reform on their housing sectors. The pivotal role of housing in the global economy is appreciable if we recall the events of between 2007 and 2008, when the subprime lending in the mortgage sector led to the bubble and pause that eventually triggered the global recession. Many nations were still facing it. Even then, the UK, US, and China used the power of investments in housing to come out of the recession. The British minister then, in Cameron, then said, and I quote, "We will build Britain out of recession." And they went ahead and did. They were building cities like the Gates, 270,000 housing units per annum, and they built UK out of recession, as I said. Unfortunately, housing issues in Nigeria has traditionally been treated as a naughty offer that can be ignored or neglected, or at least be paid lip service to. The nations that took such stand often do so at their peril. Housing programs in Nigeria, pre and post independence, are as many and varied as our political experience. The effectiveness or failure of these programs are evident in the ever-increasing housing deficit, which as of today stands at 17 million, along with high growth of slums and predominant numbers of population living in slum-like conditions across the country. The housing crisis gained political attention in the late 70s, when the political party MPN adopted housing as a slogan. In Yoruba, they called them Egbe Onile, with a house printed in the center of the party logo. The Shagari housing across the country are the living testimonies of the program. In Lagos, the beneficiaries of Dakoni administration housing provision efforts are grateful for generations to come. Since then, attempts at national level in housing provision have been a drop in the mighty ocean of the quality and quantity housing deficit facing the country. In 2006, the President government appointed us, some of us, into the Technical Board of Federal Housing Authority. The mandate was to design the blueprint for the nation's housing system. This was also presented to the subsequent government of the late President Yahya. We designed a framework that was to deliver 2 million housing units within 4 years. This would have revolutionized the entire nation under the plan. For example, under the plan was actually to build 10,000 housing units in the first year. Ladies and gentlemen, building 10,000 housing units involved using 36 million blocks, 110,000 windows, and 110,000 doors were required then, just for 10,000 housing units. Can we imagine the number of human and material resources required to produce 36 million blocks? That is the potential of housing to resolve unemployment and poverty dilemma. Housing indeed is the foundation for industrialization. The multiplier effect of any program that delivers housing in millions can never be estimated. The Center for Housing and Sustainable Development was established in December 2014 to play a critical role in ensuring that Nigerians get out of the corner of qualitative and quantitative housing deficit that is becoming a reality in our cities, towns, and villages. With a long-term vision of providing international comprehensive research and capacity building services, the center was established to provide policy engaged in academic research, capacity building courses, and advocacy in the field of housing. The real estate development and real estate development management, we are persuaded at the center that for our nation to survive, investment and support in the housing sector should occupy the center stage in the next 20 years. That is why we are partnered with organizations like UNILAG Real Estate Foundation and Housing and Urban Development, and President Group to organize this town hall meeting to ensure that the coming political dispensation, housing sector occupies its place as the catalyst for economic growth and development in Nigeria. We have solicited questions from stakeholders across the housing value chain, from citizens on the social media. We have collated these questions into 4 areas of concern, bearing in mind that this issue reflects the concerns of Nigerians. The Center is committed to the propagation of a policy document to reflect the outcome of this evening's discussion. And this will be made available to all government stakeholders. I pray that the objective of this gathering will be met. Thank you so much, and God bless you. I will hand over to Mr. I will now call on the representative of the Vice Chancellor, our Deputy Vice Chancellor of Technical Research, Professor Wale Family, to be the Vice Chancellor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Vice Chancellor is unable to be present. I'm therefore standing in for him, and I'm going to read his remarks. The presidential candidates that have been introduced to us, special guests of honor that are here present with us, members of the university community, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my great pleasure to welcome you on this 11th day of the month of January, the year 2019, to University of Lagos, University of first choice and the nation's pride. The event that we are gathered for is a great one, and the first issue the nation building Nigeria. As we all know, we are gathered here to have a discourse on the state of Nigeria's housing sector, and we have asked the ladies and gentlemen who aspire to direct the affairs of the nation in the next 4 years to do this with us. As people in the grassroots, in formal communities, youth, academia, government and professionals, as businessmen and end users, the only purpose that we are gathering here is to tackle the remote housing challenge facing our nation, Nigeria. This is because we understand the impact of housing in our social and economic welfare. In many nations of the world, housing market contributes significantly to the GDP, and its industry is a catalyst for economic development. We are here gathered here because we desire to see the housing industry take its place in social economic development of Nigeria. Not only that, as individuals, we want access to affordable and decent homes in decent neighborhoods. Unfortunately, due to a national housing deficit estimated to be about 17 million units, production rate of about 100,000 housing units annually, about half of the Nigerian population are living in slum-like conditions. With a home ownership of rate of 25%, the lowest in Africa. The World Bank estimates that 700,000 new homes have been built across Nigeria to address this deficit. So we recognize this challenge, and as it affects our lives and individual seeking a home comfort, as business seeking investment in housing sector, as government agencies and as NGOs seeking greater welfare for humanity and as youth honestly looking forward to a better tomorrow. Therefore, we are all united today in this hall in seeking ways of the way out of this quagmire as we uphold the tenets of democracy. This is the very first time we have eminent Nigerians seeking the premier position, coming to honor such a powerful duty. And we thank all of you. We are still here to come and let us know your plans for the nation. I wish to thank all of you for honoring the call, and as we proceed, let us remember that today we are all part of government, and the outcome of all discussions will be expected to be delivered in future policies. The University of Lagos is indeed proud to be the pioneer university to bridge the town and the ground divide in a matter such as national importance, as is also proud that several of the eminent candidates that have interest in the students, teachers, administrators of the university. The university is also particularly glad that this event is being carried out in collaboration with the University of Lagos Center for Housing and Sustainable Development. This center is one of the growing number of centers of excellence which the University of Lagos has launched in its agenda for innovation and advancement in development of country in all its spheres. It is with this brief remark that I declare this event open and welcome you all again to this event and look forward to the highly beneficial town hall meeting. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you so much, sir. Let's appreciate the Vice President. Thank you. Let me call on Mr. Sheku Awose to come forward and give the House the group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I stand on existing protocol. Before I start with the House rules, I just need to I want us to put our hands together better than ever before for the candidates sitting there. I said that principally because we are all aware that it takes approximately a month to get people of this caliber where they are sitting, and we did not start a month ago. So our invitation came late. And because of that, most of them have to break, their campaign to be here. It's a huge sacrifice. What differentiates us from other animals, apart from us being social animals, is because we have rules that are written down. We've been used to debates, we've been used to having candidates come together and we hailing, jeering, shouting, giving side comments and the rest, but this is different. And because of that, we need to let you know the rules that apply from this moment. Civility is declining in our socio-political space globally, and Nigeria is no different. I'm sure you know that already if you're on social media, if you're watching TV, and we seem to have lost the capacity to have constructive conversations about things that matter. Across our communities and gatherings, political, religious, social, or academic, regardless of the theme, people mostly are not interested in finding agreement, and some even attend public events with a goal of starting an argument. We are happy to announce that we don't have people with such demeanor in our midst today. Suffice to say, tonight will be historically different This meeting is about ideation, the creative process of generating, developing, and communicating new ideas, where an idea is understood as a basic element of thought that can be either visual, concrete, or abstract. Ideation comprises all stages of the thought cycle, from innovation to development to actualization. We are rubbing minds and winning hearts. We are raising argumentation without being argumentative. The formal demonstrates the will to contribute meaningfully with decorum from a graceful heart and from a depository that elicits a deep well of knowledge, while the latter will be emblematic of a chronic internal misalignment and social maladjustment. We hereby, if you want to clap for the candidates and the organizers, we can clap. We hereby implore all participants to, first, participate with intention by religiously adhering to the rules and issues at hand, which is state of housing market in Nigeria. We're not talking about Boko Haram, we're not talking about LASMA, we're not talking about the military, we're not talking about any other thing but housing. The state of Nigeria's housing market, strictly. We are eager to explore, we're eager to listen to you, we're eager to know where we're coming from, to be enlightened about where we are, and be guided on where we hope to be, and how to get there from each candidate's perspective. We want to hear and learn from you. Appreciate the diversity of perspectives by employing the kernels of wisdom based on your experience, while we implore the supporters in the audience to maintain decorum so that we can win time. I think we understood that in plain English. And also, this kind of meeting was not designed to support arguments, but learning with shared understanding. Maintain a respectful space. We all deserve respect and kindness. It is not about who is right, but what is right. We strongly believe our prejudices have been checked outside the University of Lagos gates upon entry. Diversion from the issues will no doubt necessitate the truncation or transmission from your microphone. Stay on topic at all times and be as brief and as direct as you can. It is your individual manifestos we're discussing as it relates to the issue at hand. You are communicating with the people and not merely talking to each other. So let us prioritize Nigeria and Nigerians by focusing on housing market and your plans for Nigeria on the same. To the audience, Asian devices, that is Chinese phones, especially those that miraculously ring like fire alarms, while on silent mode, should not be used at this time until we are done and safely outside the premises of the University of Lagos. Having taken care of the procedural niceties and elucidated the ground rules, I take it that the terms and conditions we often skip on the other platforms are clearly understood and acknowledged to this regard. Let me hand you over to our eminent moderators, distinguished Mr. Roland Ibinoba, the founder of Roland Ibinoba Real Estate Rose Foundation for Housing and Urban Development, and Dr. Taibat Lawson, co-director, Center of Housing and Sustainable Development, UNILAG, for this session. Do note that clarity is not achieved by security or surplusage. Brevity is essential. An extension of thought beyond the time allotted will neither be excused or palliated. The post-event reports will follow Chatham House rules, so you are free to express yourself. We also welcome your manifesto as an attachment after the program so that we can have a robust documentation which we will share with you and share with Nigerians. Transformation begins with cultivation of character, so we don't expend scarce resources unduly on managing our sins. I believe we will all comply. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're starting off business on the town hall. Now, why we put all of this together, we acknowledge that most of the candidates have proposed housing interventions in their manifestos. So the questions that were drawn were basically by stakeholders. Each candidate has about 2 minutes to respond to each question. Dr. Adeyemi is right over there, who's our timekeeper. Dr. Adeyemi, please. Okay, Dr. Adeyemi is going to let you know when it's 30 seconds into your, to the end of the 2 minutes, and then he will stop you at the appropriate time. So I think Tiber wants to let us know some of the places where we are blocking questions from.
Good evening, everybody. We have received questions from the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, Spaces for Change Organization, the University, the Center for Ethics and Sustainable Development, the Lagos State Ministry of Housing, the University of Lagos Center for Housing and Sustainable Development, various hubs under the Africa Research Universities Alliance, Center of Excellence for Urbanization and Habitable Cities, the Heinrich Böll Foundation, Arctic Infrastructure, and close to 100 questions from social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tiber. So we'll go right into the question. Our first question today borders on land. The review of the 1978 Land Use Act is long overdue. As presidential candidates, what specific steps would your government take to exit the act from this constitution and ensure its speedy reform in order to have easy access to land for housing, especially for the low and middle income? Thank you. So we'll start with, Professor Moghalu. Thank you. 2 minutes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Is it working? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Clearly, my government, as president of Nigeria, will move for the repeal of the Land Use Act. The reason is that I think the Land Use Act might have been necessary at some point, but today has outlived its purpose. It has created a massive bureaucracy concerning land titling that prevents investment with economic efficiency in the housing sector. It has trapped about $300 billion of debt capital in this country's economy today, because the ownership of land by the state with only grants of certificate of occupancy reduces the economic scope of what individuals can do with their land to raise capital if they were to own their land in freehold. So my government will certainly be moving for the repeal of the Land Use Act. We will be replacing it. We'll be moving for the repeal and proposing an executive bill that makes land titling under private ownership much more efficient. That is going to be our core approach to the Land Use Act. Thank you.
So, Dr. Obi.
I think that the core of that question goes to the challenges of building consensus on what to do with the Land Act. There is no doubt that it will be politically difficult to get everyone on board the necessity for us to upturn that act because of the barrier that it has created to not just housing, but every aspect of industrialization in our country. Therefore, a key thing is going to be to provide all stakeholders the evidence of how this act has limited the economy. That data is going to bring more people to the table to do something about that act than merely telling them that we want to repeal the act. Having shown the evidence to the different stakeholders, the most important thing is going to be an acceleration process for actually evacuating that act and putting in place a new system of access to land that is very transparent, that is very efficient.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Thank you very much. Your time is up. Yeah. All right, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I want to apologize to students who are here that the two most prominent candidates, APC and PDP, are not here because they caused your lecturers to go on strike. And
Mr. Sowore, you have only 2 minutes.
Don't worry, I have 2 minutes. I will address you in 2 minutes. Thank you. I have said it, and I'll repeat it here, that the unitarism that you saw that the military brought onto Nigeria started in 1978 when they smuggled the Land Use Act into the Nigerian Constitution. That was done by Obi's father, Olusegun Obasanjo. And since then, don't worry. You know I love you, man. Since then, this country has not had any progress. What we need is to return to land ownership. But we must be careful not to return to the kind of customary ownership of land that we had in Nigeria before independence, in which just a few people own land to the extent that the majority are left without land. What I would do is go after the Nigerian Constitution, the 1999 Constitution, which is a fraudulent document imposed on the Nigerian people by the Nigerian military. That document must be expunged by the will of the Nigerian people and be replaced with a living document that is discussed, debated, and deliberated by the Nigerian people. And that document must pass through a referendum. And in that document, a Land Use Act will become a thing of the past. And Nigerians can decide who owns land.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Durotoye.
Well, good evening, everyone, and good evening to all Nigerians watching, both at home and in diaspora. Thank you for the opportunity to share. My understanding of housing is best summarized in a philosophy. You either build homes or you build prisons. Because when people are homeless, it puts them on the street, it leads to crime, and crime will eventually find new homes for them in prisons. The only problem with prison is that they don't pay rent. So if you got them houses, they would grow, they will pay rent. And so for me, I've also believed that home ownership is one of the most important things to having a sense of citizenship. In any nation where people don't own homes, they don't feel like they are part of that country. They don't feel like nationals. And therefore it's easy for them to relocate to any other country that they want. One of the first things that happens when Nigerians relocate abroad is they first of all buy houses. And that makes them have a sense of belonging. So the first thing I'm going to do, the Durotoye-led administration come May 29, 2019, is to declare a state of emergency on housing. And make sure that we put together all the stakeholders to come together and have a national housing vision that says we want to make sure every Nigerian has access
to cheap, affordable, safe, attractive, and most importantly, functional homes. How do we get that done? It's what we'll put together, get all the legislators together, get all the minds, the brilliant minds, both at home and in diaspora. But the most important thing is we've got to bring the people together, share the vision, and they will create.
Thank you very much, Mr. Durotoye. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We have, in our 4-year program, we have a policy called Operation Access Nigeria. Nigeria right now is not accessible because our land is in the hands of few cronies through the Land Use Act. So what we're going to do is, through discussions and conversation with stakeholders, we will repeal and probably replace. Right now, we can blame, but we are not in the business of blaming other people. If you are a government worker and you are between level 1 and level 5, you are not part of Nigeria, because we've checked the maps. I'm a builder. We know how to build. But I'm going to challenge, because this is the citadel of education and engineering in Nigeria. The cost of the materials for housing is one of our problems. If you are on level 1 to 5, you can only access less than 1 million naira to build a house. If you are between level 5 and level 10, you can only access 1.5 million naira. Every state in this federation, they will tell you that they
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is a categorical, it's going to be a categorical statement from our candidate. So I'm going to ask the question, and you're going to tell me whether your government will, it's a yes or a no. Currently, housing is bundled, the Ministry of Housing is bundled with works, power, and works and power, essentially. So in your government, will you prioritize housing with a separate ministry and a strong framework for implementation in line with SDG 11 that has categorical targets and indicators? I start with Mr. Oshitelu. Yes or no? No. We will break down. No. Thank you. Mr. Durotoye.
Yes.
Sowore.
My answer is yes.
Dr. Obi. Professor Kingsley.
The easiest question in the world. Yes.
Thank you very much. So housing is going to be a priority for all our candidates. Fantastic. Which brings me to the next question. The 1999 Nigerian Constitution, Chapter 2, Section 16D, guarantees the right to suitable and adequate housing for all Nigerians. What would you do to protect this right, especially for vulnerable people, women, those living in informal communities, people living with disabilities, and those currently in internally displaced Nigerians? So we start from the center of the room, and then we go ahead. So we start from Mr. Sowore. 2 minutes.
That particular section of the Nigerian Constitution suffers a major defect, and that right is not justiciable. You cannot go to court to sue the Nigerian government if you have no home. So that is why I said that Nigerian Constitution of 1999 is a fraudulent document created by the military and imposed on us. What we need to do is to make housing a right for our people in the country, in this country, that government must invest in shelter, that every Nigerian citizen must be entitled to a place to lay their head at night, a home. And we have to make the investment. And what I'm proposing, what our government will do, is to put aside $3.6 billion. And I mean this, we should turn this country into a construction site where we are building homes until at least an average Nigerian has a home. We are in need of 17 million homes. Over 80 million Nigerians are without homes. What we do is to set the standard that an average of 5 Nigerians should be entitled to a house, a father, a mom, and at least 3 kids. And the moment we do that, then we'll be talking about all the chapters of our Constitution that guarantees the right to shelter, without making the investment, without building homes, without making policies. I'm not talking about mounting policies. Look, our problem in Nigeria is that the rich, the 1% of our population already have too many houses. Some of them own mansions,
Thank you.
some of them own villages, they own cities.
Thank you. So we invite Professor Moghalu to tell us how he will protect the rights of vulnerable Nigerians to adequate housing.
Hello? Hello? Is it working? Yeah. Okay, very good. My government will protect the rights of citizens to adequate housing by pursuing a very aggressive policy of social housing, number one. And that will be achieved by making sure that we bring innovation to housing construction. One of the challenges that will always arise with the wishes of any government is costing. How much does it cost to build a good social house? So we're going to bring in technology. The Ministry of Science and Technology will be tasked to develop materials that will develop social housing at 1/3 of the cost of what it is today. That's number one. Number two, we will need to make a decision as to whether we need to pursue social housing in terms of expansion across the land or moving up, because you have to think forward. Number three, we have to have a serious policy about slums. We must improve our slums, not seek to eradicate them so that they become posh new residences for the wealthy, as we saw in Morocco. We saw it in Morocco, but we need to bring adequate water and sewage management to slums. As the Rockefeller Foundation says, if you do this, the shack becomes a house, eventually the slum becomes a suburb. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move the mic across to Mr. Oshitalu.
What we are going to do is we will embrace social housing as well, but we will regenerate the slums. By regenerating the slums, we are not going to embark on what is presently being done, where they will remove people and snag their houses and never bring them back. When we are going to regenerate, we will relocate them and then give them the first right to refuse to come back, because they are already in that community. If they want to live in that community, they should be allowed to do so. And we will also engage in serious technology where, and we will engage in subsidized housing. Because let us be real, the teeming population that cannot really afford the houses, no matter what we do, even if we build them 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom, it is still not going to be accessible to them. So our government will earmark a certain amount of money, and we know exactly where to get this money from, because we will take the money from stopping the subsidy on imported finished petroleum products.
Thank you. So we'll move the mic across to the lady, Dr. Obi. But I'm happy to see that our candidates understand that forced eviction is not an option. And that's very good. Dr. Obi, over to you.
The number one thing that we have to understand is that housing is an important part of lifting people out of poverty. The major thing to do is to ensure that people have income that enables them to be house or those who rent houses on a long-term and sustainable basis. So an economy that enables improvement in income is fundamental. Number 2, don't clap so that I can use my time well. Number 2, that in the development and design of social housing, we must understand how the right policy triggers a stronger participation of the private sector in the provision of social housing. Number three, we must look at our slum environments from the perspective of economic corridors. If we looked at them as economic corridors, it completely shifts the way that we treat the poor, who are co-located in environments that are even detrimental to the achievement of our sustainable development goals. So my final take on this is to say that tackling poverty is hugely tied, according to research, to what we do with housing for the poorer segment of our society.
Thank you. And finally to Fela.
All right. As I said at the beginning, the first thing we're going to do is to declare a state of emergency on housing. And with that, we would also have what we call a national emergency housing fund to the tune of ₦1 trillion, which comes to about $3.6 billion. And the second thing that we're going to do is to ensure that we have a policy framed around something called CSR, collective social responsibility, meaning that we understand that housing is not just a government problem to be solved, it's a societal problem that needs to be solved. So we're going to see how we're going to drive and inspire the private sector and ordinary citizens to work together. And a practical example of the kind of thing I'm talking about was a project we did in 1999 called Mushin Makeover. Some of you may remember that. It's a project where we mobilized over 2,000 people to paint 296 houses in Mushin, places where they couldn't afford to paint themselves. So we could uplift that place. And of course, that was very helpful. The third thing that we want to do is to have shelters. And those shelters are going to be places where homeless people can go and stay for one night if they are willing to be part of a skills acquisition program. So if you are willing to be part of a skills acquisition program, you have a tent, you can go and stay in that place, but that way you are going to be able to earn your way out of being able to stay there for one night. Before they go to bed, each one of them must sleep, must take a bath, so that they are able to lie down on the bed and they will remain clean. So that's one of the most important things. Last one is new cities. We're going to build new cities.
Thank you. I think our time, Dr. Abiy, I think
You were enjoying the conversation. Okay, thank you very much. For those of you watching online, we have 4 hashtags: housing market, town hall meeting, hashtag town hall, and at CHSD_UNILAG, which is a Twitter handle. Okay, great. We'll move on to the value chain that is also, we have considered an important part, which is housing finance. Today in the country, various mortgage products are continuously promoted by both the government and the private sector. Okay, so in government you have the Federal Savings Homes Loans Board, you have the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. Across the private sector you have several mortgage banks. But with all of this, mortgage still remains elusive in the country. It almost seems, or there is a systematic problem. So as the president of this country, how can we deliver a mortgage system that captures our local realities and exigencies, especially in the terms of the deficits that we all know? So I'll start with Professor Moghalu.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. As a Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, I approved the license of the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Corporation. It has done a few things, but not enough. As President of Nigeria, I will encourage a policy shift. The problem with mortgages in this country is that the only people who are getting them are those who are already rich. The mortgage system is not addressing the lower middle class and the poor. So we are going to have to add more capital for mortgage refinance in Nigeria. One of the ways we are going to do that, I proposed that the new Development Bank of Nigeria should be completely changed in terms of its mandate. It is doing something which I believe that the 1 trillion naira venture capital fund I propose should do, which is investing in small businesses. That new Development Bank of Nigeria should be like BNDES in Brazil. It should be the mega development bank for the country and have a first line charge on the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Part of what it should be doing is to be funding the refinancing of mortgages so that there can be some sort of subsidized mortgage support for poorer people in the society to be able to access affordable housing, not just giving mortgages to those who are upper middle class and wealthy people. So I will take a more socially responsible approach to mortgage finance in Nigeria. It doesn't exist right now. It's a game for the upper middle class as it stands.
Thank you very much. Dr. Secretary, you're next.
You know, one of the things I would never want to do as a candidate is to raise expectations that ultimately will not be realized. Because it's important to be that way. So the first thing that I need to say is that there is a huge component in the housing conversation that the market can take care of. And then we must identify the segment of it that you need a subsidization. But the subsidization must be done in a way that is market efficient. So the work that we would do in terms of refinancing is that we would shape policies that would enable pre-finance and refinancing in the way that the market sees the incentive for the volume of business that is possible by targeting the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. What that does is that it inspires entry into the sector by capital that was stranded, unable to find where to reside. So the deepening of our country's financial sector, especially through the capital market is going to be tied to that opportunity that the private sector will see in housing while the government augments through efficient subsidies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The big elephant in the room is that you have poor people in this country, you have workers who are poorly paid, and nobody is talking about incentivizing workers to be able to afford houses. What I'm going to do is to increase the salary of an average Nigerian worker. Minimum wage will be 100,000 naira. Listen to me. Out of that 100,000 naira, listen to me, don't buy into my time. Don't bite into my time, please. Out of that 100,000 naira, I am going to make sure that an average Nigerian worker can get 2 million naira mortgage loan. Every year, 20% can be invested back, paying back your money. And well with your mortgage. Listen to me, if you're doing well with your mortgage, you can refinance the mortgage to do other things in your life, including sending your children to schools where you probably cannot compete with the rich. You can even go on vacation after you get a second mortgage loan. Isn't it not interesting that I'm the geographer here and I have a better agenda than the economists who spoke before me? You know, the truth here is that nobody is talking about empowering the Nigerian masses so that they can be eligible to take mortgage. If you go to the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, the collateral they will ask you, you will never come back there again until you die. Why are we deceived here? We have to have a policy where God authorize mortgage for low-income workers. And the best way to do it is to give them a minimum wage that's a living wage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sowore. Before Mr. Durotoye go ahead, I'd like to address two key issues, Mr. Sowore. One, the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria has as much requirement, while not advocating or being an attorney for them, has the normal requirement for accessing a mortgage loan. And then, secondly, I like the fact that you will increase minimum wage to 100,000. My worry is, how do you manage the other side of inflation? Sorry. If we have time, you'll come to that. But I'm just saying you should put that in perspective, because there will be...
If you want to throw yourself into that, you got to let me address it. Because the issue of inflation is something that has been around to prevent workers from getting their due for a long time. The question you should ask yourself, what was inflation caused by all the subsidy fraud that happened? $6.2 billion was stolen by...
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. We'll come back to it. Mr. Durotoye.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Please, let us remember the house rules. There will be time for us to ask questions and then hear them preach like a pastor. But for now, let's continue to maintain decorum so that they can give us what they have for us. And you remember that we also have some special guests in the house that we are yet to recognize, who are also going to weigh in as far as Lagos is concerned. So please, let us maintain decorum while I hand you over to you.
Thank you very much, Sega. Go ahead.
So just to bring a reminder to the question is, how do we make mortgage financing available to all? That's the simplicity of what it is that we said. And in a sense, cheaper mortgage financing. Many of the speakers ahead, my co-candidates, have already spoken about the fact that a significant portion of what it is that we have, that the players in the market today are people who already can afford mortgage finance. So there must be that part of the, like I said, collective social responsibility, which for most companies will come as corporate social responsibility. So many of the companies today are doing different kinds of socially responsible projects. We are going to be asking as many companies as possible to invest in social housing, and we will provide matching funds from our National Emergency Housing Fund. That also will then work with what I call diaspora funding. We need to get the diasporans who are currently earning enough, and most of them looking for ways to save their money and also have a sense of belonging in Nigeria, to have protected housing in estates, that we would provide infrastructure, we will provide power, we will provide roads, water, and all of those things, and ask them to invest in those protected housing so that they are able to do so with little or no stress about having to build themselves. So the two things, the last one very quickly, is that we have a stock of empty and abandoned buildings all across Nigeria. And we have some people estimate in the region of 100,000 empty buildings. We need to create a policy that says if nobody claims those buildings and can say you will have a finishing point, Nigeria will take those empty houses and we will make them available to the people who cannot afford them so that they can use them.
Thank you very much.
I have a different approach to the mortgage system. The mortgage system is very foreign to Nigeria, even to those who have access to it. So even for university graduates that are just coming out of school, the mortgage system is still foreign to them. So what we are going to do, I'm a builder. I know how to build, and we are going to build this nation. But the present approach is not working. This system whereby you are using Wall Street economy doesn't work. We have to use the corner street economy. Our banks have failed this country woefully, including the central bank. And that's why you still have, in all the markets, people doing contributions, and you have cooperatives. What we will do, we will incorporate it into a mortgage system where the professionals in the building industries, especially the quantities of villas, because the pride of a Nigerian is to own his own home, and it takes pride in building it systematically. We need to work with the people. The system that we are trying to bring is so foreign, and people have resisted, and government is not listening. We are going to listen. We will make sure that the system where the people wanted is what we are going to do, so that everybody can take pride in owning a home and building it in a way that they will have the pride, and it will still be built within maybe 6 months or 10 months or 12 months, where the banks will be the custodian of...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question we have for the candidates is more on practicalities. A lot of research and lived experiences shows that the bureaucracy in government tends to be problematic. And so people don't take approvals because the process is chaotic, it's stressful, and then there are so many agencies doing the same thing that one tends to get confused as to what to do. How will you go about streamlining the process? That's one. And the second one is, how will you synergize the activities of the various ministries and agencies of government that are invested in various stages of the housing value chain? So I start from, would you like to start? Yes, yes. Okay.
At the core of every development activity must be a compelling vision. And when people see the benefit of that vision, it's easy for them to connect with it. The Durotoye and Alliance for New Nigeria-led government will share the vision of doubling our building capacity in every year, starting year 1 with 250,000 houses, year 2 with 500,000, year 3 with 1 million, and year 4 with 2 million houses. Meaning that in the first 4 years of our administration, we're committing to seeing construction of 3.75 million houses. Now, the thing is bringing everybody to the table, states, local government, and the private sector, especially even with the development agencies, to come and say how we each and every one has a part to play in actualizing that goal, especially when you sell what you would call the ripple effect on the economy. When you talk about everything that will happen when the private sector is able to build, set up factories and all of those kind of things that need. So the first most important thing in streamlining and getting all the agencies involved, the second thing is we must set a processing goal that says whatever application you set to, within 30 days, it must be resolved, and that must be done within our first year. So every application must be resolved within 30 days. And then everybody must find out what do we cut off, how do we cut it off, and that's basically what is going to happen.
Thank you. I think Mr. Oshikali wants to go next. Good.
Question that you have asked. Being a civil servant, worked in the Ministry of Housing before myself, so I know exactly what you are talking about. The problem is not, maybe 50% is in the approval process, but the biggest problem is, as I said before, Nigeria is not accessible. You see, because not every land in this country has been surveyed. So therefore, for somebody that wants to buy a piece of land, is not even sure what he's buying. That's why you see one Omonile selling a piece of land to 10 people. So what do the ordinary man do to avoid is he start building. And the one thing that government can do is, it is only here, even in Ogun State, everywhere, is government is always catching up. Instead of government to encourage the stakeholders to have those infrastructures ahead of buildings. So whenever you are building a new Victoria Island or a new Akwete anywhere, you will discover that it is going to become a slum at the end of the day, because the necessary infrastructures are not done first. And this is what I call taking care of the small things, so that those small things can take care of the big things. Thank you.
Thank you. So, who wants to go next? Okay.
In 25 years, the National Housing Fund, which is part of the the mortgage, the federal government's mortgage bank, has only been able to create about 17,000 housing units in 25 years. Now, this is a fact. You can check it out. It is a spectacular failure of political will. Let me give you an example. When Jakande was the governor of Lagos State, we saw what he was able to do with housing in this state. When Fashola was the governor, there was progress in some other areas, but it didn't look as if there was so much progress in housing. Today, housing is one of a super ministry of about 3 or 4 impossible mandates. The first thing as president of Nigeria is that I will separate housing from those 3 other mandates and make it housing and urban development. Number 2, all the institutions in the value chain, I don't see in the current housing, policy architecture, which one has a strong regulatory role over building standards in this country and just making sure that housing policy is executed? The problem in this country is that there's no regulation of anything. There's no regulation of hospitals. There's no regulation of schools in terms of standards. There's no regulation of housing in terms of standards. Or if there is, nobody respects it, and there is no consequence. Regulatory policy is important. Making sure that whichever institution is in charge of anything delivers on its mandate is important. That is a performance management issue. Performance management will be one of the prime issues, one of the major offices of my presidency.
Thank you. So, Dr. Obi.
So, the problem of excessive bureaucracy and regulation is what the housing sector is going through. And so the most important thing is to acknowledge the most important thing is going to be to get the data that tells us where we are in terms of this over-regulation and Oga, don't clap too much, you will eat into my time. So we know that it takes right now 21 days for the processes of registration to happen. We know that it takes about 274 days for the entire gamut of what you need to do in transfer of titles and things like that to happen. We have to set process targets, one. Number two is that there is something called blockchain technologies. What blockchain technology is doing in terms of digitization process is unbelievable. It removes too much human interaction and therefore saves the housing sector from the major scam that we see in the bureaucratic process that is in the value chain. And then number four is that the connectivity between all that we do with housing to the wider economy will also help us reduce the duplication that happens in the value chain. So we don't look at housing as an insular sector. We look at it as a connector sector. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sowore.
Thank you. I will be running a government that's allergic to bureaucracy. And I mean it. That part of the problem that our housing sector has is that we also do not have documentation. Proper documentation, the processing of this documentation, you can almost go around Lagos and not know, except you are lucky, the documentation of any particular house. And I say this as a journalist. There was a time a pastor bought a house for a prostitute. I mean it. And I was trying to find the documentation. And I couldn't find it in Lagos. I used everything I can. They said you have to see somebody somewhere before you can get the documentation. The reason is that nobody wants you to know what is going on in this country with regards to how houses are built, who owns houses, because most of the houses you have in Nigeria are owned by just a few people. And we also have to have a transparent land registry system in Nigeria. In the UK, that was how, as Sahara reporters, I was able to catch a lot of thieves, because they have a central land registry. If you know the address, you will know the owner of the house and how much they pay for the house and how much it is worth. We have to be able to do that in Nigeria. Without this, we can't even start to plan. And don't forget, with due respect, I studied geography and planning at the University of Lagos. I never intended to be a journalist. And my hope is that as president, we will replan this country completely from the bottom. and have a future that, of course, is digitalized.
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you very
digitized,
much.
sorry.
Digitized. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Sowore. Still on governance issues. Now, Lagos State is the economic hub for Nigeria, as we all know. And it was the Federal Capital Territory until 1991. So there were a lot of significant federal government lands and administrative property in the state. Today, these properties are abandoned, and their total value runs in billions of naira. If elected president, how would your office facilitate the release, reuse, remodeling, and redevelopment of these properties in such a way that it will increase the national housing stock? So I'll start. Okay, you can start.
The reason I wanted to go first on this is that this was an issue that a policy pronouncement and design was already done sometime in the administration that I was part of. What is it that creates an incentive for the next administration to abandon a policy progress? Because that has become a problem, what I would do is to not even waste time. So the first thing that we must acknowledge is that our total budget now, 2019, is just $30 billion. It is not even equivalent to the budget of the New York Fire Service. So we need all the resources we can find. Therefore, there won't be any kind of time lag in getting the diagnostic on the existing houses of the federal government in Lagos State and immediately doing a conversion program for the private sector and public use of the kind that ensures higher productivity of earning for our country.
Thank you very much.
I will not give any more of our public institutions to the private sector. They've had enough. And what I'm going to do is to do an inventory of what is left of federally owned properties in Lagos. And the ones that we can convert to schools, we converted to schools. The ones that we can convert to houses will be converted to houses and given back to workers. I would love to convert the federal secretariat to a hospital in Lagos. Yes. Instead of dashing it to cockroaches and lizards. The federal government of Nigeria is a wasteful government. If we convert this to private use, it's going to end up in the hands of our ministers, governors, party leaders, national leaders of some of these political parties who are based in Lagos, like the Jagaban in Lagos here. We don't want to give any more of our properties. Nigerian properties should be used by the Nigerian people, period. And we don't even have enough space to take care of our social needs. We can't give any more of our properties to the private sector. In fact, I will be looking at how we can get some of the things that were sold to them at below market price back to the Nigerian people.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Who's going next? Okay, Mr. Durotoye.
Like I said a little earlier before, there is a stock of an abandoned houses in Nigeria that has to be put up. And so we're going to set up a board
specifically to look, and this will be set up with some of the most reputable people. That it will be like something like a Shopee, but exactly what do we have on ground and what is the best use that we can put it to. Some of that use, like has been said, would be hospitals, some of it will be offices. But another interesting thing that we can do is we can actually give these buildings to developers who will be able to let and rent them out so that we can have returns on the investment that the government has already made into it. So listen, there's so many people today that want offices. Young people that are looking for offices that are cheap and affordable. And then you have the Federal Secretariat there in Ikoyi, and it's empty. Like my brother said, it's filled with cockroaches and lizards. Yet there are people that are looking for offices. They are willing to pay rent on them. We will make sure that we find a way to commercialize every building, either by renting them out or leasing them out on long-term lease. This is what it is, so that the government can earn money on the return and get a return on all the investments that is in the past.
Thank you very much, Mr. Durotoye. Mr. Sowore.
My approach is going to be just very different, but it's close to what you have said. I would prefer to use all those buildings, take the stock, and use them as upgrade student accommodation.
Thank you. Thank you. Prof.
Thank you. My approach would be very simple. Depending on where the abandoned federal property is in Lagos, that is what should influence what you want to use that property for. You bring in the experts. Some of it should be used for social housing. Some of it can be used for private sector developments for offices. It's a combination, but it depends on and what round, because that's part of it. You don't go and build a housing estate in the middle of a commercial office development area. So I think the location is what will determine the use. It's a mix of social housing, public use, and private sector development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had an interesting evening, and please give a round of applause to all the candidates. We have also had quite some engagement from social media, and the guys on Twitter have been sending in questions and comments, so you can always check the hashtag. And so now we are rounding up, and we'll just want to give an opportunity to one of the governorship candidates who is in the House, Babatunde Olalere Gbadamosi of the ADP, to say one word. 1 minute, please. Yes, 1 minute. 1 minute concerning housing in Lagos.
35 years ago, Alhaji Lateef Jakonde built 20,000 affordable housing units in 4 years and 3 months in this same Lagos state. Since then, construction technology has moved on in leaps and bounds. And in the next 4 years, we will be delivering a minimum, and this is all about managing expectations, a minimum of 40,000 affordable housing units, 10,000 affordable housing units year on year. It is clear that we have land limitations in Lagos State. So we're not going to be doing 10 floors, 15 floors. Minimum 20 floors. Minimum 1-bedroom flats, 2-bedroom flats. Because of our demographics, 70% of our population are people between the ages of 35 and 18.
Thank you, Mr. Gbadamosi.
Thank you.
Your 1 minute is up.
Okay, so thank you very much, sir. As a final word, we are just going to ask each of our presidential candidates to give us their final word. Please, 1 minute. 30 seconds to 1 minute, please. We'll start from you, Professor Moghalu.
And we go down the road.
Yes, thank you very much. I think, thank you for this discussion. I think it's been wonderful. I think the question of housing is important for Nigeria for 3 reasons. 1, developing the housing sector is important for inclusive growth. All the spin-offs of housing construction, masons, laborers, electricians, they all get more work and they all earn income if we develop our housing sector. That's number 1. Developing the housing sector is very important as a way to diversify Nigeria's economy. That's also very, very important. So I think that housing is certainly something that should become a priority. It is also a priority because developing our housing sector will be one of the ways to fight corruption in this country. One of the things that gives rise to corruption in the public service is the fear of growing old and not having a roof over your head. So developing housing is part of fighting corruption. So I'd like to say that housing is a very important priority for this country and certainly will be in my presidency.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moghalu. Dr. Obi.
The startup program, which looks at what a standard housing opportunity should be for the poorer segment of our society, is one of the flagship initiatives in our manifesto. We will completely accelerate its design and execution. Number 2 is that we will connect everything that has to do with expanding access to housing to the Get a Skill, which is what focuses on producing 900,000 diverse skills in our economy. The housing sector holds the promise for mental skills building. Number 3 is that the economy has to grow and everyone needs to be able to be productive and competitive in the economy. So macroeconomic stability that would enable the poor to not have inflation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Housing under a Sowore administration starting from June 12, 2019 will be a fundamental human right. And my promise to the people of Nigeria is that you cannot continue to vote for people who took off your roof and expect to have shelter. You cannot expect the present crop of failed political leaders to provide you houses when they have no plan for your future. They destroyed your opportunity to have a house in the past, and they have no plan to build you homes for the future. But it's very important to tell Nigerians that we can build Nigeria out of poverty. That is what they did in China, and that's why they have what they call ghost apartments. They did it in Singapore. They did it in South Korea. It is time for Nigeria to have its own housing revolution and a general revolution that will put an end to the old cargo.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
2019 is not just any ordinary year. 2019 is a year to decide whether we want the old Nigeria that now has 108 million homeless people in the most blessed country on earth, simply because it's poorly managed. Or you want a new Nigeria where it has access to a safe and affordable house and shelter. In the new Nigeria, every child above the age of 6 not only has a roof over their head, but also a bed that is their own. To make sure that all of this works, We've got to take housing as the center of our social development and our economic development, like it's been done in the UK, in the US. 90% home ownership in Singapore, 70% home ownership in the US. We can also have an home ownership in Nigeria, but that is in the new Nigeria. So vote for a new Nigeria, where you will have access to cheap funding to be able to get knowledge and all that you need.
Thank you very much, Mr. Durotoye. Thank you.
In Accord Party, is we have a shortage of approximately 700,000 homes to be built per year. Simple maths, put it at 50 homes or apartments in every ward. This is achievable. Not only that, to build a single family dwelling home will take 6 individuals to work for 6 months. So if we embark on seriously building Nigeria, now we are going to have a robust economy. We have people employed, and it will increase our GDP. Therefore, I'm employing every one of you to please take your time to vote Accord Party in the next election.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're committed to leaving here in the next 10 minutes, and so we apologize that we will not be able to take questions. However, the conversation continues on social media. All the candidates are active on Twitter at least, and on Instagram and Facebook. But you can follow the conversation on hashtag housing market, hashtag town hall meeting, hashtag town hall, and please follow us at PHSD_UNILAG. That is the Twitter handle for the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development. May I now invite Professor Nubi to close the meeting.
Oh my God. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, ably represented by the DVC here now, we want to appreciate our special guest for tonight, the aspirants, for the people that are as the candidates, for the next election. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate your sacrifice. We appreciate the fact that you were able to see what this center at the University of Lagos see. From what we have heard from you, we've discovered that all of you have passion for housing, and you understand that if you want to change the narratives of this nation, we have to pay a particular attention to housing. I want to say that for whoever will rule this nation, understanding the mystery behind housing is key. And like we have been told, that it's the beginning of a discussion. And even after the election, whoever formed the government, the center in the university is willing to work with the government to make sure that all Nigerians have access to affordable housing. We want to appreciate as many that have been around. There are many personalities among us that time failed us to recognize. We have MDs of organizations among us. We want to appreciate your time. We believe that there is a passion for a better Nigeria, and that is why we are here. And I am believing God that that better Nigeria will soon see in the nearest future. I want to appreciate your coming. Thank you so much, and God bless you. So we just have photographs with the candidate, and then we will close the ceremony. Let's just have photographs with the candidate. We can all clap for ourselves for being a very wonderful audience. Let's ask questions, but please keep on asking your questions.